Hello, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to go through the Bmat 2013 Section 2. This exam has 27 questions and has a duration of 30 minutes. This is the scientific knowledge and applications part of the Bmat. Just a quick reminder, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this. Also, leave a comment if you want further clarification on any explanations. Now, without further ado, let's start answering some of these questions. Which of the following applies to both the nervous system and the endocrine hormonal system? And they've given us 3 statements to look at. So, it could be involved in homeostasis. That is correct. People usually associate the hormonal system with homeostasis, when actually the hormonal system as well as the nervous system can be involved in homeostasis. For example, shivering is a nervous response and is an important part of homeostasis. Now let's look at statement number 2. It can involve chemicals. That is true. The nervous system and the hormonal system both use chemicals. In the nervous system, you have neurotransmitters that transfer across synapses. So that's one type of chemical in the nervous system. In regards to the hormonal system, there are many different types of chemicals that are used. For example, testosterone is one of the hormones used in the hormonal system in males as well as females. So 2 is correct. Statement number 3, it can involve the brain. That is correct. This statement is true because the brain is made up of neurons and is part of the central nervous system. And also, there are many parts of the brain, such as the pituitary gland, that secrete different hormones. So, 3 is correct. Therefore, the answer to 1 is H. That's question number 1 completed. Question number 2. The following chemicals are mixed together. In which of the mixtures will a displacement reaction occur? And they've given you 4 reactions. So, the general idea around displacement is that a more reactive metal or halogen will displace a less reactive metal in its compound. A displacement reaction will occur in reaction number 1 because aluminium is more reactive than lead. A displacement reaction will not occur in reaction 2 because the fluoride ions need to be in the F2 form, not in the ionic form, in order for it to be able to displace chlorine. So displacement reaction won't occur for reaction 2. For reaction 3, a displacement reaction will not occur because iron is not as reactive as aluminium. And finally, reaction number 4, zinc is more reactive than copper, so a displacement reaction will occur there. So the answer to this question is D, and that is question number 2 completed. Question number 3. Microwave, X-ray and infrared radiation can all damage living tissues. Which of the following statements correctly explain why this damage occurs? Statement 1, microwaves cause damage because they are absorbed by water molecules. 2, X-rays can cause damage because of their ionizing ability. 3, infrared waves cause damage because of their ability to penetrate matter. So let's see whether these 3 statements are correct. So statement number 1 is correct because microwaves generally are associated with heating up things, such as in a microwave oven. The microwave gives energy to the water molecules, causing them to evaporate and heat up. This could damage the inside and outsides of the cell. So statement number 1 is correct. Statement number 2, X-rays cause damage because of their ionizability. That is correct. This is because X-rays can excite and ionize atoms into ions, which can then damage cells, X-rays are also able to ionize atoms because they have an energy that matches or exceeds certain energy levels within atoms. Because they have this energy, they are able to raise electrons out of the potential well of the atom and leave an ion behind. This is very damaging for the cell. And statement number 3, infrared waves cause damage because of their ability to penetrate matter. This is incorrect. Infrared rays are quite like microwaves in that they heat up the water inside a cell, so 3 is incorrect. Therefore, the answer to this question is D, and that is question number 3 completed. Question number 7. Given that x is equal to 4.6 times 10 to the 7 and y is equal to 2 times 10 to the power of 6, what's the value of x plus 7y over x minus 2y? I've decided to pre-write my working out. And as you can see, my first line consists of me substituting the values of x and y into the formula that they've given. My second line is me trying to expand the brackets, not fully simplify at this point. My third line is me simplifying down each of the terms of this equation and simplifying it down till I get the answer of 10 over 7. Therefore, the answer to 4 is A. That's question number 4 completed. Question number 5. The action of which enzymes could decrease the pH of a mixture of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipid. So 1 is carbs, 2 is protease, 3 is lipase. So those are the 3 enzymes: carbohydrates, protease, lipase. So carbohydrates breaks down carbohydrates into sugars. Sugars don't have any effect on pH, so we can eliminate 1. Protease breaks down proteins into amino acids, which are acidic, and they have a low pH, so 2 is correct. And 3, lipase. Lipase breaks down lipids into fatty acid and glycerol. Fatty acids are acidic, they have a low pH, therefore they can decrease the pH of the mixture. Therefore 3 is correct. And the answer to this question is F. And that is question number 5 completed. Question number 6. The following reaction is at equilibrium. 2R plus 3x goes to 2t, and this is a reversible reaction and the enthalpy is negative. Which conditions A to E would produce the most product of T? So this question is assessing your knowledge of yields. Do not get confused between yields and rate. So, in regards to temperature, a low temperature would be desirable for a high yield. This is because the enthalpy change is negative. So let's eliminate anything with high temperature. Now let's look at pressure. So there are 5 molecules as a reactant and 2 formed as a product. So we want more of this to be produced, and there's less product than reactant. Therefore, if there's a higher pressure, it will move the equilibrium to the right hand side as there's fewer moles being produced on the right. So therefore we want high pressure, so we could eliminate anything that doesn't have high pressure, which is C. Now adding more R and S will increase the yield compared to adding low amounts, so we can remove E. And what do you know? The answer is B, but just in case maybe you didn't know R and S, let's move on to the final column, catalyst. It doesn't really matter if a catalyst is present or not. This is because a catalyst affects rate. It doesn't affect the yield. A catalyst does not change the equilibrium of a reaction. So the answer is B for question number 6, and question number 6 has been completed. Question number 7. The diagram shows 3 appropriate meters, P, Q, and R, connected in the conventional way in a circuit. The switch is initially open. The switch is now closed. What happens to the readings on each meter? So, first things first, looking at the diagram, we need to determine what type of meters P, Q, and I are. P is an ammeter because it's connected in series to the circuit. Q and R are voltmeters because they're connected in parallel to the circuit. So, with that knowledge, we can answer the question now. So, when the switch closes, it short circuits the resistor it's in parallel with, causing the current to bypass the resistor completely. Since one resistor has been bypassed, the overall current resistance has been reduced, and using Ohm's law and rearranging the equation so that we get R is equal to V over I, we can see that when R decreases, I increases. You have to bear in mind that the voltage in this case is being held constant. Therefore, we could assume that the reading on P is going to increase. So anything that says where P decreases can be eliminated. So A can be eliminated, B can be eliminated, C can be eliminated, D can be eliminated. Lovely jubbly. Now, looking at the voltmeter R, we can see that the potential difference it is measuring will drop from a positive value to 0, as the resistor is short-circuited by the switch. Since the switch has 0 resistance, there will be no potential drop across the switch, and therefore the voltmeter will read a decreased value that will go all the way to 0. So anything that states R increases can be eliminated. That's E, that's F, that is G. Hey, and what do you know? The right answer is already given to you. But I'll still go through voltmeter Q. So now let's consider voltmeter Q. We know that the current through the whole circuit has been increased since, because of the decrease in the total resistance in the circuit, and thus using Ohm's law again, V equals IR, the potential difference across the resistor must increase, resulting in an increase in the voltage shown in voltmeter Q. And therefore, the answer to this question is H, and that is question number 7 completed. Question number 8. Simplify 4 minus x squared, open bracket, 1 minus 16x squared, close bracket, over 4, open bracket, 4x minus 1, close bracket, 2x cubed. So this is a question that's assessing your ability to factorize and simplify an expression. And I've pre-written my working out just to save time and enable you to understand what exactly you're meant to do for this question. So, line number 1 that I did was to basically factorize the quadratic that was in the bracket in the numerator. And I was lucky in that it was a difference of 2 squares, so I wrote that out. And then on the second line, I noticed that there was similarity between this and this bracket, these two brackets. However, if I multiplied one of those brackets by minus 1, they would both be the same. So I did do that, and I changed the the negative minus sign into a plus positive sign. And you're able to do that. So I did that, and then I cancelled them out because they're both common factors. One's in the numerator, one's in the denominator, and that leaves you with this. And what I did for this is that I brought it all over one common denominator, 2x, and I factorized it, and the answer is 6 plus 1 over 2x, and therefore the answer to this question is E. And that is question number 8 completed. Question number 9. In a reflex action in which a person touches a hot plate and pulls their arm away, neurons of different lengths are involved. Which answer identifies the relative lengths of neurons? This is a question that you need to know the information about. You can't work it out during the exam, realistically speaking. So, the sensory neuron is the longest out of the three. So, anything that has something other than sensory neuron can be eliminated. The shortest neuron is going to be the relay neuron, so we could eliminate A. That leaves us with F, and the motor neuron is in between the two. And that's question number 9 completed. Question number 10. 1.15 grams of sodium completely reacts with water at standard temperature and pressure. What volume of hydrogen at STP is produced by this reaction? And they've said, assume in this question that 1 mole of any gas at STP has a volume of 22.4 decimeters cubed, and that's the molecular weights of hydrogen, oxygen, and sodium. So, step number 1 for this question is write out a formula for this reaction. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So, 2Na plus H2O goes to hydrogen gas plus 2 sodium hydroxide. So, that is step number 1 completed. Step number 2 is working out the moles of sodium. So to calculate moles, we need to use the formula moles is equal to mass over mR. So in the case of sodium, it's 1.15 divided by 23. And what is that? That is equal to 0.05. Now that we know the moles of sodium, we can now try and figure out how much hydrogen has been produced in moles and then in centimeters cubed. So, for every 2 moles of sodium reacting, 1 mole of hydrogen gas will be produced. So, with this information, we could divide 0.05 by 2 to get our moles of hydrogen gas, which is 0.025. And that is the number of moles of hydrogen gas. And now we can multiply that number by the volume of 1 mole of any gas, STP, which is 22.4. So 22.4 times by 0.025 is equal to 0.56, and that's in decimeters cubed. and we want it in centimeters cubed. And here's a neat conversion that you should remember. 1 decimeter cubed is equal to 1,000 centimeters cubed. So if we times this by 1,000, 0.56 times by 1,000, that is equal to, therefore the answer to this question is B. And that is question number 10 completed. Question number 11. The diagram shows 2 glass blocks in the air. For the rays of light shown, the critical angle for the air glass boundary is 42 degrees. A ray of light is shown approaching the boundary in each case, with the angle of incidence labelled. 2 possible labelled directions in each ray might travel after reaching the boundary are also shown. Which line in the table correctly shows the direction taken by most or all of the light, and also state whether total internal reflection will occur? So what I'm going to do first is tackle the total internal reflection side of things. So for diagram 1, the angle that the light is travelling at is 40 degrees. 40 degrees is less than 42 degrees, therefore total internal reflection will not occur. Now, we are also able to determine that Q is not an option for the direction of the light at the boundary. And now let's move on to diagram 2. The ray of light is 45 degrees. 45 degrees is more than 42 degrees, and therefore total internal reflection will not occur. And also we are able to determine that R is not possible and S is the only direction that the light could travel in. So therefore the answer to this question is C. And if you want more clarification on this question, please leave it in the comments, because this was a particularly difficult question. I've read some of the exam guidance afterwards and the exam review, so please leave comments if you want some further elaboration. That is question number 11 completed. Question number 12. The square ABCD is positioned so that the vertices are at the points with the coordinates 1, 1, minus 1, 1, minus 1, minus 1, and 1, minus 1. The square is rotated clockwise through 90 degrees about the origin and then reflected in the line y is equal to x. Which transformation will return the square to its original orientation? The best way to answer these questions is by drawing each transformation out and then visually trying to solve. So that's exactly what I did. So this is the original square, this is when it's rotated 90 degrees, and this is when it's reflected. And we now want to get this square back to this shape. And how do we do that? We do that by reflecting in the y-axis. That means B is the answer for 12, and that's question number 12 completed. Question number 13. Which of the following is not needed in order to genetically engineer bacterial cells to produce fluorescent protein from a jellyfish? So option A is ligase, B is plasmid or viral vector, C is fluorescent protein from a jellyfish, D is enzymes that cut DNA molecules. So, do we need ligase for genetic engineering? Yes, we do, to join the gene and the plasmid together. B, plasmid or viral vector, we need that because that's where we're going to insert the gene into. C, fluorescent protein from a jellyfish, we do not need that. And the reason for that is because for genetic engineering, you don't need the protein itself, but much rather you need the DNA that encodes for the protein. So the answer is C for question 13, but I'll still go through D. D, enzymes that cut out DNA molecules. You do need that because that's how you get the gene from the jellyfish into the bacterial cell. So that is question number 13 completed. Question number 14. Which one of the following pairs do not have the same electronic structure? And they've given us some elements in the periodic table and their position. And we have to choose between 5 options. So let's start with option A. So MgCl2 is an ionic structure. Mg loses 2 electrons so that its electronic structure becomes that of neon. Each chlorine gains an electron so that their electron structure is equivalent to argon. It is therefore that MgCl2 is equivalent to 2 argon atoms and 1 neon atom. It is not correct to state that MgCl2 has the same electronic configuration or electronic structure as 3 argon atoms. So therefore, A is the answer to question number 14. And that is question number 14 completed. Question number 15. 2 radioactive sources X and Y have half-lives of 4.8 hours and 8 hours respectively. Both decay directly to form 2 stable isotopes. The activity of a sample of the source X was measured by a detector to have 320 counts per minute, and simultaneously the radioactivity of sample of the source Y was measured to have 480 counts per minute. Immediately after the measurements, the 2 samples were combined. What was the count rate when the activity of the combination of X and Y was measured 48 hours later? Assume that all readings in this question have been corrected for background radiation. So, starting with sample X. It initially has an activity of 320 counts per minute, and over a 24-hour period, it will undergo a certain number of half-lives. And how do we calculate that? We do 24 over 4.8, which is equal to 5. Therefore, it will undergo 5 half-lives. Thus, we would expect the number of atoms and therefore the activity to decrease by a factor of 5. So 2 to the power of 5 is equal to 32. Therefore, the activity will decrease from 320 to 10. Because 320 divided by 32 is equal to 10. Now, let's consider sample Y. Sample Y starts the experiment with a count rate of 480 and undergoes a certain number of half-lives. Let's calculate that. So 24 over 8 is equal to 3. So it undergoes 3 half-lives. So it will decrease in activity by a factor of 2 to the power of 3, which is equal to 8. Therefore, the activity will decrease from 480 to 60. How do we know that? 480 divided by 8 is equal to 60. And we want to work out the total count rate after 24 hours. 60 plus 10 is equal to 70. Therefore, the answer is D. And that's question number 15. Question number 15 completed. Question number 16. 3 variables, x, y, and z, are known to be related to each other in the following ways. X is directly proportional to the square of z, y is inversely proportional to the cube of z. Which of the following correctly describes the relationship between x and y? So, step number 1 will be to translate these statements into expressions. So x is directly proportional to z squared and y is directly proportional to 1 over z cubed. Now that we've done that, let's rearrange statement number 2 to something that is a bit more usable. So let's rearrange it to give us z, for example. Z is proportional to 1 over y, 1 over to the cube root of y. And let's substitute this into 1. So, since x is directly proportional to z squared, let's input 3 into 1. So, x is proportional to 1 y all squared. And let's make this look a bit nicer so it's easier to calculate and read. In other words, simplify. X cubed is indirectly proportional to the square of y. And therefore D is correct, and that is question number 16 completed. Question number 17. Since Dolly the sheep, many other mammals have been cloned by somatic cell nuclear transfer. The genetic material from a body cell is inserted into an egg cell that has had its own nucleus removed. The success rate ranges from 0.1 to 3%, which is why so few cloned animals have been produced. Consider the following statements. Statement 1. An egg with a newly transferred nucleus may not begin to divide or develop properly. 2. The sperm cell may not fertilize the egg cell. 3. Implantation of the embryo into a surrogate mother might fail. 4. Implanted stem cells may not differentiate properly. 5. The inoculated egg and the transferred nucleus may not be compatible. Which of the following numbered statements above are possible correct reasons why the cloning may fail? So statement number 1. Statement number 1 is correct. This is because this could occur if the egg or its nucleus has been damaged during the nuclear transfer. So let's give that a fat tick. Statement number 2. This is incorrect. This is because the sperm is not required in cloning. The nucleus for an egg comes from a somatic cell. So, no, that is incorrect. Statement number 3 is correct. This is because the problem could occur, and this would prevent the embryo from continuing to develop in the uterus of the surrogate mother. So let's give that a tick. 4. This statement is incorrect. This is because the cell will only fail to differentiate properly if the DNA is damaged during the nucleus transfer. The embryo is screened before implantation for DNA damage, so only cells with undamaged DNA are implanted. Therefore, there's literally a 0 possibility that the cell won't differentiate properly, assuming that the implantation was successful. And 5, the inoculated egg and the transferred nucleus may not be compatible. This could be an option, and this is correct because the nucleus and the egg could indeed be incompatible, causing the nucleus transfer stage to fail. Therefore, 1, 3, and 5 are correct, and the answer for number 17 is A, and that's question number 17 completed. Question number 18. An impure sample of sodium hydroxide has a mass of 1.2 grams. All the sodium hydroxide completely reacts with a minimum of 50 centimeters cubed of 0.5 molar hydrochloric acid. Which is the percentage purity of sodium hydroxide sample. And they've given you the molecular mass of hydrogen, oxygen, sodium, and chloride. I've pre-written my working out, and I'll now explain step by step what I did. So step number 1, I wrote out the reaction that's taking place. So 1 mole of sodium hydroxide reacts with 1 mole of HCl that gives 1 mole of water and 1 mole of sodium chloride. Now step number 2 for me was to work out the moles of hydrochloric acid used in the reaction. And how do I do this? I know that moles is equal to concentration times volume, where the concentration is in molar and the volume is in decimeter cubed. So I know that the concentration is 0.5 and the volume is 50 centimeters cubed, or 50 divided by 1000 decimeter cubed. So 50 over 1000 times by 0.5 is equal to 0.025 moles. That is the number of moles of hydrochloric acid used in this reaction. Since there's a 1-to-1 ratio of HCl and NaOH, the number of moles of NaOH is also 0.025. Now I want to work out the mass of sodium hydroxide. How do I do this? I use the formula mass is equal to moles times by concentration. Let me just correct that. Moles times by molecular weight. And first I'm going to quickly work out the molecular weight of sodium hydroxide. So it's 23 plus 2 plus 16, which is equal to 40. And now I'm going to input my moles of sodium hydroxide, which is 0.025, and multiply it by the molecular weight of sodium hydroxide, which is 40. And 0.025 times by 40 is equal to 1. Therefore, 1 gram of sodium hydroxide reacted. Now, the question is asking for the percentage purity. So I do 1 over 1.2 times 100, which is equal to 83.3 recurring percent. So the answer is E. And that's question number 18 completed. Question number 19. Two resistors R1 ohms and R2 ohms are connected in series to a battery which has an EMF of V. Which formula gives the power dissipated by resistor R1? So this question is essentially testing your knowledge of circuits, and you need to know a lot of the physics equations, in particular the ones relating to power, current, voltage, and resistance. So you know that power is equal to current times voltage, which is also equal to current squared times voltage, which is equal to voltage squared over resistance. You also know that the total resistance in a circuit, in this circuit in particular, is R1 plus R2. And you know that the current in this circuit is the voltage over R1 plus R2. Now you could input all of this information into your power equation, and you get V2 times R1 over, open brackets, R1 plus R2 close bracket squared. Therefore, the answer to this question is D. And that is question number 19 completed. Question number 20. A solid shape is made up by joining 3 cubes together, with the largest cube on the bottom and the smallest on the top. Where the faces of the 2 cubes join, the corners of the smaller cube are midpoints of the sides of the larger cube. The sides of the smallest cube have a length of 1 centimeter. What is the total surface area of this shape? So for this question, for ease of your understanding and also to save time, I decided to write out all my working out beforehand and then just talk my way through the question. So What this question is asking you to do is actually quite simple. Use Pythagoras' theorem to work out the surface area, the surface area of this shape. So let's start with step number 1. The surface area of each full face of the smallest cube is 1 times 1, which is equal to 1 centimeters cube. There are 5 fully exposed sides of this cube, so we need to multiply 1 centimeter cubed by 5, which is equal to 5 centimeters cubed. Now on to the next step. The surface area of a full size of the next cube then needs to be calculated. Consider the bottom face of the small cube resting on top of this cube. The diagonal line, let's call that D, from one corner to the other of this bottom face is the same as the width of the top face of the bigger cube. This is because the corners of this bottom face lie on the midpoint of the top face of the middle of the cube, and so a diagonal will be parallel to the edges of the top of the face as well as being the same length. So by using Pythagoras' theorem, it can be deduced that d squared is equal to 1 squared plus 1 squared, which is equal to 2. And to work out d, we square root d squared, so therefore d is equal to root 2, and that is the width of the middle cube. The area of a face of the middle cube is therefore root 2 in brackets squared, which is equal to 2. There are 4 fully exposed sides, so we have to do 2 times 4, which is equal to 8 centimeters squared. The top face of the middle cube is not fully exposed because 1 centimeter squared is covered by the cube on top, so 2 centimeters minus 1 centimeter is equal to 1 centimeter squared, which is the area of the top face. So the total surface area so far is 5 plus 8 plus 1, which is equal to 14 centimeters squared. Now step number 3, we're now going to apply the same principles that we used in step number 2 to the bottom cube. So now d squared is equal to root 2 squared plus root 2 squared, which is equal to 2 plus 2, which is equal to 4. Therefore, d is equal to 2. A full side of the cube therefore has an area of 2 times 2, which is equal to 4. There are 5 exposed faces, so we do 5 times 4, which is equal to 20 centimeters squared. The top face is partially covered, so let's work out the surface area of that, which is equal to 4 minus 2, which is equal to 2 centimeters squared. Now let's add all of the surface area together from the 3 cubes. So we have 14 plus 20 plus 2, which is equal to 36 centimeters squared, and that is the answer to the question. Therefore, the answer to this question is D. And that is question number 20 completed. Question number 21. Which of the following could be found in an adult liver cell? So number 1, a gene for amylase, 2, sex chromosomes, 3, starch. So let's go through the 3 options. Number 1, the gene for amylase. This is correct. The reason for this is because it contains a nucleus, and the nucleus will contain chromosomes, which has the gene for amylase. Fair enough, in the liver cell, this gene may be switched off, but nevertheless, it's still there. So let's move on to number 2, sex chromosomes. That is true. Sex chromosomes are found in all somatic cells. Let's give that a tick. And number 3, starch. Starch is not found in adult liver cells. They are a type of carbohydrate store, and the liver does store carbohydrates, however, not starch. It stores glycogen. So therefore 1 and 2 are correct, and the answer to this question is E. That's question number 21 completed. Question number 22. Using standard techniques to balance chemical equations and ensuring that the net charge is equal on both sides, find the correct value for E in the balance equation shown. So they've given us an equation and they've not balanced it. Personally, I dislike these questions in the Bmat. I would just automatically skip them because you'll waste so much time trying to calculate how to do them. But anyways, I'll explain it to you. I've decided to write out my working out prior to talking about this question. The reason for that is because I feel that it's a lot easier for you guys to understand my thought process during my explanation. So let's get straight to the question now. So step number 1 is to find a starting point, and the starting point will be looking at the number of chromiums on the left hand side and on the right hand side. So on the left hand side, you know for a fact there are 2 chromiums, and on the right hand side there is D many chromiums. So immediately you know that D is equal to 2. So what to do now? Let's start with carbon. Might as well start from somewhere, because at this point you could start from carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, but let's start with carbon. Carbon on the left hand side is equal to 2A, and when I mean carbon is equal to 2A on the left hand side, that is the number of carbons on the left hand side. So 2A is equal to 2C, so there are 2 C carbons on the right hand side. So therefore we can simplify this expression down to A is equal to C. Now let's move on to hydrogen. Hydrogen is equal to 4A plus B is equal to 4C plus 2E. And let's do the same with oxygen. A plus 7 is equal to 2C plus E. Now, using the carbon equation that we worked out before, where A is equal to C, let's replace C in the hydrogen and oxygen equations that we formed with A. So these equations will now turn to 4A plus B is equal to 4A plus 2E. That is for the hydrogen equation, the new one, and we could simplify that down to B is equal to 2E. And let's do that with the oxygen equation that we formed. A plus 7 is equal to 2A plus E. And that could be further simplified down to 7 is equal to A plus 2E. Now, this is where this question is being quite helpful. It tells us to look at the charge, and we could form an equation with the charge. So that equation will be B minus 2 is equal to 3D. And then from that, we could work out that B minus 2 is equal to 6, because we know what D is equal to. D is equal to 2, because we worked that out for step number 1. And therefore B is equal to 8. And since B is equal to 2E, and therefore is equal to 8, E must be equal to 4. So the answer to this question is C. This is quite a nasty question. Myself personally, I wouldn't get too bogged down into working it out. I would immediately skip this sort of question in the exam. fill out a random answer in the sheet. If you have time at the end and you've double checked everything else and you know you've got everything else right, then I'll spend time on this question. Otherwise, you're just going to be throwing away easy marks. So that's question number 22 completed. Question number 23. Consider the graph. Which one of the following could the graph not represent if all the quantities are in SI units? So step number 1 is determine what kind of graph is being represented. This is a straight line graph. And can we work out the gradient for this graph? Yes, we can. How do we do that? We can see that the y value increases by 20 units when the x value increases by 100. So therefore the gradient must be 1 over 5. So in relation to the equation y equals mx plus c, m is equal to 1 over 5. Now, to the c part of this y equals mx plus c, there is no y-intercept, therefore c is equal to 0. So the equation of this linear graph is y is equal to 1/5 x, or y is equal to x over 5. So now the next step will be to match up this line equation with one of the, well, not with one of, with 4 out of the 5 options given below. The one that doesn't match up with this is the answer to this question. So let's look at option number 1. The variation of acceleration y-axis of the body of mass 5 kg with a resultant force acting on the body x-axis. So this option could be true because replacing y with a and x with f gives f equals 5a, which fits the equation f equals ma for a constant of 5 kg mass. Now let's look at option B. This the variation of the current y-axis through 5 ohms resistor with the applied voltage x-axis. This option could be true because replacing y with I and x with v gives v equals 5i, and this fits the equation for Ohm's law, v equals IR, with a constant 5 ohm resistor. Option number C. This option could be true because replacing y with ke and x with v squared gives v squared is equal to 5ke, which fits the kinetic energy equation of kinetic energy is equal to a half mv squared when replacing m with 0.4 kg. Now option D. The variation of wavelength y of the waves with a speed of 0.2 meters per second with their frequency x-axis. This could not be true because replacing y with wavelength and x with frequency gives frequency is equal to 5 times wavelength. This is not what fit the true wave equation, which is speed is equal to frequency times wavelength, and therefore the answer to this question is D. But I'll still go through E. The variation of work done y-axis by the force of 0.2 newtons with the distance it moves through x-axis. This option could be true because replacing y with work done and x with distance gives distance is equal to 5 times work done, and this fits the equation of work done in joules is equal to force times distance, and this is when the force is equal to 0.2 newtons. So the answer is D to this question, and that's question number 23 completed. Question number 24. A bag contains 8 blue balls and 2 red balls. 3 balls are taken out of the bag at random, one by one without replacement. What is the probability that exactly 2 of the balls are the same colour? So, we know that there are going to be many different options for getting out 2 balls of the same colour in 3 picks. You could have red, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, red. You could also have blue, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, blue. And if we work out the probabilities of getting these combinations and adding them together, that'll be the answer to this question. So the probability of getting red, red, blue is equal to 8 over 10 times by 7 over 9 times by 2 over 8, which is equal to 7 over 45. And this is going to be the same probability for red, blue, red, and blue, red, red. And I'm just going to add those 3 probabilities together. So 3 times by 7 over 45 is equal to 7 over 15. The reason why I did 3 times by 7 over 45 instead of writing out 7 over 45 plus 7 over 45 plus 7 over 45 is because it's just quicker to do. So we've now got the probability of red, red, blue, red, blue, red, and blue, red, red. That's equal to 7 over 15. Now let's work out the probability of blue, blue, red. And that's going to be equal to 2 over 10 times by 1 over 9 times by 8 over 8, which is equal to 1 over 45. And 1 over 45 is going to be the probability of having blue, red, blue, and red, blue, blue. And I'm going to add these 3 probabilities together. So 3 times by 1 over 45 is equal to 1 over 15. Just to make that extra clear. And I'm going to add these 2 combined probabilities together. So 1 over 15 plus 7 over 15 is equal to 8 over 15. And therefore the answer to this question is C. And that is question number 24 completed. Question number 25. Manx cats with 2 recessive alleles have a tail. Heterozygous Manx cats lack a tail. Individuals with both dominant alleles die before birth. Which answer shows the percentage of Manx cats without tails in a population for 2 crosses given in the table? So this question is assessing your knowledge of Mendelian genetics, and I assume that you know that for something to be heterozygous, it needs to have the dominant gene and the recessive gene, one of each. And for something to be, for a recessive trait to be expressed, you need both of that allele. So in this case, it's going to be, let's call the recessive allele little a in this case. To have a tail, you need to have 2 little a alleles. So let's get into the question. I've already drawn out the Punnett squares for column number 1 and column number 2. So let's start off with Manx cat with a tail crossed with a Manx cat without a tail. So you know that if a Manx cat has a tail, it's going to be recessive, and it's going to have 2 of the recessive alleles, so it's going to be little a. And you know that if a cat does not have a tail, it's going to be heterozygous, so it's going to have 1 big A for the dominant allele and 1 little a for the recessive allele. So there's the Punnett square, and that's it filled out. And from there we are able to work out the genotype, the potential genotype of the offspring that this cross will give. So a genetic cross of little a times by big A little a gives offspring genotype ratio of 2 big A little a to 2 little a. So let me write that out just to make it a bit clearer. Hopefully you'll be able to understand that from the Punnett square already, but I'll still write it out. 2. So from that ratio, we know that the percentage of Manx cats without tails is going to be 50%. Now let's look at the cross between a Manx cat without a tail and a Manx cat without a tail. So both parents are going to have a genotype of big A, little a. They're going to be heterozygous, and there is the Punnett square completed. So you have big A, big A, big A. You have big A, little a. You have big A, little a, and you have little a, little a. You know that immediately that you can't have two dominant alleles together because it will kill the cat before birth. So the probability is going to be, or I should say the ratio is going to be 2 big A, little a to little a, little a, and the percentage is therefore going to be 67%. So now we could answer the question, and the answer is going to be C, and that is question number 25 completed. Question number 26. The addition of NO as a catalyst to a mixture of SO2 and O2 speeds up the reaction. SO2 plus half O2 goes to SO3. The following reactions could be involved in the progress, and there are 6 reactions stated. Which one of the following shows the most likely course of the overall reaction? So, for this question, I would just do elimination and go down the list, honestly. And this question is assessing your knowledge of catalysts. Catalysts do not get used up by the reaction, so the two options that you do pick, NO needs to be constantly either used or produced in the same value, in the same amount, so there is no net change to the amount of NO in the system. Also, the reactions shouldn't produce or use any reactants that's going to affect the main reaction of SO2 plus a half O2 goes to SO3. So let's start with A. A says that it's reaction 3 and reaction 1. This is incorrect because reaction 3 produces NO2. NO2 is not used up in reaction 1, and NO2 is not produced in the overall reaction, so therefore this is not possible. Let's give that a fat cross. Let's move on to option B. Option B gives us reactions 3 and 6. This is correct, and that is because the NO2 is generated in reaction 3, which is then used up in reaction 6. The NO, which is the catalyst for this reaction, is regenerated by reaction 6, leaving the NO moles or concentration unchanged in the system. The whole point of a catalyst, as I mentioned before, is that it does not get used up in the reaction. So therefore B is the right answer to this question. I'll continue going through the other options, but realistically in an exam, you're not going to have that much time and you wouldn't really pay attention to any of the other options, but I'll go through it anyways. Option C is incorrect. This is because reaction 5 produces SO3 without there being any need for it in reaction 1. Catalysts usually make intermediary products which speed up the rate of reaction. This reaction is therefore unlikely because the catalyst is making the final product. That is a big no-no. Option D is incorrect because reaction 2 requires N2, but no N2 is made in reaction 3. So that's obviously a massive red flag. Option E is incorrect for the exact same reason as C. Reaction 5 uses the catalyst to make the final product. The catalyst in this case is meant to be an intermediate product that is regenerated. It's not meant to be part of the overall equation. So that is question number 26 completed. Question number 27. A resultant force of 20 newtons has accelerated a body of mass 4 kg from rest until the present moment, at which time its kinetic energy as 1800 joules. If this force continues to act unchanged, how much extra kinetic energy will the body gain during the next 2 seconds? So, firstly, you should be thinking about Newton's second law, which is F equals ma, and you know what the force is, you know what the mass is, but you don't know what the acceleration is. So you need to work out the acceleration, which is equal to 5 meters per second squared. Now, we know that the current kinetic energy is 1800 joules, from which we can find the current velocity from the equation E is equal to half mv squared. And if we rearrange the equation so that we get v as a subject, v is equal to square root 2e divided by m. So let's input the values that we know of E, which is 1800, and m, which is 4. So that gives us root 900, which can be simplified down to 30 meters per second. So we now know the velocity. Now we want to work out the new velocity, and we use one of the Suvat equations that I didn't write down, which is v is equal to u plus at, where v is the new velocity and u is the old velocity. So v is equal to 30 plus open bracket 5 times 2 closed bracket, which is equal to 30 plus 10, which is equal to 40 meters per second. So now let's work out the new kinetic energy of this. So the new kinetic energy will be a half times 4 times by 40 squared, which is equal to 3200 joules. So we now need to work out the difference between 3200 joules and 1800 joules. So we need to work out the difference between the final and initial kinetic energy. That's equal to 1400 joules. And therefore the answer to this question is E. And that is question number 27 completed. Thank you very much for watching and listening to this YouTube video. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this. And please leave a comment down if you want any further explanations to any of the explanations that I've given so far for any of the questions. Also leave comments down for any future videos that you want me to make that is related to medicine entry exam. That could be to do with past papers for your A levels, GCSE past papers, Bmat and the UK CAT. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you on another one of my videos.